In America at the moment, one of them weather, with extraordinarily low temperatures and snow even in Florida, and the other big storm in America, of course, the book Fire and Fury that has been published by Michael Wolff, making all sorts of accusations about the stability or otherwise of the 45th President of the USA, and Trump's astonishing reaction to it. More of that in a moment. But to begin, I am going tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock to the Berlaymont building, the HQ of the unelected European Commission, the seat of power, the government, indeed, of the European Union. And I'm going there at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning to meet Michel Barnier, the European Union's chief negotiator. Now, of course, I've met Monsieur Barnier many times over the years. He's been in the European Commission for quite a long time. He always, if I'm sitting in the members' bar having a cup of coffee or whatever it may be, he always comes across, shakes hands, says hello. He is unfailingly polite in absolutely everything that he does. But without doubt, he is a total Euro fanatic. He's joined at the hip in many ways with Juncker. And of course, they want to push on with their United States of Europe, with every single country having the euro and a new foreign policy without veto powers, the completion of European army, and they, I think, are his real priorities. But my real reason for wanting to go to meet him is quite simple. It is that there have been an absolute never-ending procession, it seems to me, of Remainers going into the office. Nicola Sturgeon, Sir Nicholas Clegg, we've seen Lord Adonis, Ken Clarke, Blair, of course, has been over there meeting Mr Juncker. All of this going on. A Labour Party, of course, led by Jeremy Corbyn, which has very much changed its tune from the manifesto it ran on in June. And if you take all of that and then think about the government and what they've been talking about with Mr Barnier, I genuinely don't think that Mr Barnier has heard the views of the 17.4 million people who stood up against the establishment, not just the British one, but the global establishment, and voted to leave the European Union. So I do want to go and represent that view. You know, we didn't vote for a transition period. We didn't vote to go on effectively paying the membership fee for an extra couple of years. But there are some pretty big issues that we did vote on. So I just wonder whether Mr Barnier really understands all of this. And I shall also be I will too talk about trade and some of my thoughts on that. But the big picture stuff, why we voted to leave, and what the key issues were that motivated voters to stand up as they did on June the 23rd, 2016. So, as you may know, using the hashtag AskBarnier on Twitter, you can send through your questions. I've selected a few from the thousands that have come in over the course of the last couple of days, and that Twitter account is going to be open. You can go to @Nigel_Farage or @LBC, and we will keep that open until 11 o'clock this morning. And yes, I will use some of your questions directly to Mr Barnier and tell you what his answers were, because that seems to me to be right and proper, because I don't think the 17.4 million are being properly represented. So to join in this conversation this morning, what should I ask Barnier? Please call me on 0345 6060 973. Make sure the questions are relatively clean. Maybe you think immigration is one of the key issues, in which case you can text me on 84850, or maybe you think I shouldn't be going at all, and one or two have said that, in which case, using the hashtag Farage and LBC, you can tweet @LBC. And then later on, after 11 o'clock, we're going to have a look at Theresa May's reshuffle, or perhaps we should call it her diversity reshuffle, the idea that the Tory party does not reflect modern Britain. And I'm going to be asking you then to debate with me, what do you want to see in that reshuffle tomorrow? What kind of people should represent us at ministerial and cabinet level in this country? Well, the most fundamental question, I think, to go to Mr Barnier with tomorrow morning, and it's interesting that Paul William Smith has tweeted in, ask Mr Barnier if he understands why the majority of the British people voted to leave the European Union. And I think that's absolutely the right question. You see, I think the elites, both in this country and indeed the elites over in America, view Brexit, they view Trump as a short-term outburst of anger, motivated by lies or, of course, by huge Russian interference. They simply can't accept the results of 2016. And of course, why did we vote? Why did we vote to leave? Well, there are lots of reasons, but there was one reason that motivated people who'd never voted in their lives to go to the polling booths on that day. And yes, it was the question of open-door immigration. It was the fact that, particularly since the former communist countries had joined, the numbers of people coming into this country every year had reached unacceptable levels. And they're still running, in my opinion, at unacceptable levels. You ask yourself why. There is a National Health Service crisis this winter, and yes, sure, absolutely, within management, there are many things that we could do better within the NHS, but basically what we have is a population crisis. The British population is rising by about 500,000 people every single year, and 3/4 of that is directly attributable to government immigration policies. So that's Paul William-Smith. I will be asking that question. I want to know whether he understands that actually this is at the heart of it, and I will endeavour to find out whether the British government has even raised this issue. Because all I ever hear from Theresa May, all I ever get from David Davis or anybody is timetabling, trade talks, but nobody has actually talked from the British government about controlling the numbers coming into Britain. Keith is on the phone from Stoke Newington. Good morning, Keith. What shall I ask Barnier?
Yes, good morning, Nigel. I think the question you have to put to those people over there, those dictators, is that...
So I take it you're a Leave voter, Keith?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think that the question you have to put it, referring to this recent government defeat by 309 to a lower amount, is that giving the government power, the facility to withdraw if they decide that the settlement bill is not right. Gives them the facility to override Brexit at some point, and several MPs have said that, which I think you should say to the Europeans, that is a constitutional violation and illegal, because what the government has now done is they've taken the power away from the 17 million completely, and which makes the government, this government, a dictator, overriding the referendum, which is illegal, and I think those Europeans are going to use to their advantage, and I think there should be a legal. The court should be making order to say that withdrawal bill is illegal and it has to be rescinded.
Well, Keith, you haven't got a cat's chance in hell of that happening. And if you wanted to bring a constitutional challenge against the government or even take them to judicial review, I reckon you'd probably be wasting your money. But the one point I will make to him about our position is that unless they're prepared, and remember, Keith, we're moving on to phase 2 now. Phase 1 was their insistence that we coughed up a huge sum of money. We have. Their insistence that the European Court of Justice would continue to have say over EU citizens living in this country, and we've accepted that. So we've kind of met all of the terms they asked for. Now what we're moving on to is, can we have a simple free trade agreement that doesn't involve the freedom of movement of people, and that doesn't involve all of our laws in perpetuity having to be parallel to theirs? And I think, Keith, the argument I'm going to put to Mr. Barnier is he can listen if he wants to Lord Adonis and Tony Blair and Sir Nick Clegg, if he wants to do that. But actually, what I'm beginning to hear are a lot of people in business saying we cannot afford to spend years and years and years of doing this if they're not prepared to be reasonable on services, and particularly financial services. Then maybe the time has come for us to simply walk away. And my argument, Keith, would be that if we get to that, it's not the UK that'll be hurt disproportionately by this. It's actually the rest of Europe that will be. So I'll be saying to him that it does actually make sense when we talk about trade for them to be reasonable with us.
I totally agree with everything you say. 100%, Nigel. I really do. And it's got to be made very forcibly that they're the ones that are going to be hurt, not us.
Yes.
Because, if you look back in history, we've always beaten them internationally on trade, and they're terrified of us, and that's why they're trying to control it.
I'm also curious, Keith, who is he representing? Is he representing the member states of Europe, the companies in Europe, the workers in Europe, or is he representing those glass and steel structures and the European Union itself in Brussels? And I suspect it's the latter. But you know what, Keith? I'll report back tomorrow, and I thank you for your call. Charles is calling from Birmingham. What should I ask him, Charles?
Well, my question is this. The EU says they owe England £34 billion, and they will start paying it back to us in 2054 in payments.
This is
why can that be took off our exit bill so we only owe 6 billion? And why have we got to wait till 2054? By then, the EU might not exist.
Well, well, that's certainly true, in my view anyway. Well, either it won't exist or it will be a full United States of Europe. If that was there's no halfway house going ahead. Mm-hmm. Charles, they owe us nearly 9 billion sterling through the European Investment Bank. And as you say, they claim none of that can be repaid until 2050. And there is this question of our share of the assets. Charles, I promise you, one of the things I will ask him tomorrow is what happens to our share and why are you trying to delay it for 30 years? Charles, I'll ask that. I absolutely promise you. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, here on Sunday morning, and it's 10:15. I'm off to meet the EU big cheese, Michel Barnier, their head negotiator, at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I'm asking you, what should I be asking him? Now, there are some people, of course, who don't even think we should move on to phase 2, who don't even believe there should be a debate about the terms upon which we leave. They don't even think we should be leaving. And Alistair Campbell, true to form, this morning, has had a real go at Andrew Marr on the BBC. He says right from the word go, Andrew Marr sets the usual BBC News tone on Brexit. 2018, the year we decide how we leave the EU, should be whether. But the Beeb black out on this debate, and I have to say, I did tweet back, come on Alistair, the war is over, mate. But there are the Alistair Campbells, and there are even Sir Vince Cable, who we had in the studio the other Sunday. There are people who want genuinely an exit from Brexit. They are, in my view, predominantly amongst the ruling classes of this country, and I don't think out in the country that view commands very much support. Certainly not 48%, far less than half of that. Michael is a new caller from Camden. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well. So what do you think I should be doing tomorrow with Michel Barnier?
Well, I've got a question to ask you. Why are you going?
Oh.
I mean, you say that you're going to ask questions that need to be asked, but do you believe in democracy, Nigel?
Well, I do, Michael, which is why I do want Mr. Barnier to be acutely aware that not only did we defy the international community, every big business in the world on the 23rd of June 2016, but that in a general election, 85% of us voted for parties that said we should leave the EU, the single market, and indeed take back control of our borders. So I do believe in democracy, Michael, yes.
Yeah, but Nigel, here's a fact. We have, like it or not, whether we're conservative or otherwise, whether we're behind Theresa May in our personal thoughts or not, we have a legitimately elected Prime Minister representing a party that represents the country in a negotiation with another party. And all, with all due respect, you and others that go to meet Barney and everybody else do is undermine the person that we've actually elected to lead us in this negotiation.
Okay, no.
17.4 million.
I understand the point you're making. I understand the point you're making. All right, well, let's put it like this, Michael. I don't want to undermine the Prime Minister's position on this. I want to back up absolutely everything she said a year ago next week in her Lancaster House speech. That was her first.
What is your elected position to represent me and the rest of the majority of the populace who elected our government?
Oh, Michael.
No, Nigel, what is your...
Let me tell you, Michael, I lead...
Please tell me.
You can listen if you want to. I lead the biggest UK political party in the European Parliament. Why? Because I led UKIP into the 2014 European elections and we won. We came top. The first time since 1906 that a party that wasn't Labour or Conservative won a national UK-wide election. That is why. Funny enough, Michael, I would have been in Brussels tomorrow anyway, because I don't only go there as a UKIP MEP, I lead a group in the European Parliament too.
The question is different. Who do you represent in an officially elected capacity?
If you didn't get the answer first time, I'm not going to win second time, am I?
Well, no, you're not, because you do not hold a democratically elected.
Oh, Michael, please. Right, let me just try this. It's Sunday morning, so I'm not going to get shirty, but I'll try this one more time on you. All right. So I am a member of the European Parliament. I represent UKIP. I was the leader of the party at the last European elections in 2014, where we beat the Conservative Party, we beat the Labour Party, we won. We came first. We have the most MEPs from the United Kingdom. Not only that, but I've got other Eurosceptic groups with me. I lead nearly 50 MEPs in the European Parliament. I sit on the front row. I sit in seat number 20, and Mr Juncker sits in seat number 21. Do you think I have democratic legitimacy to go tomorrow?
Not on the basis that we as a country are negotiating.
Michael, I've enjoyed your call. We're going to have to move on. Well, folks, I did try my absolute hardest there. I mean, what elected authority did Sir Nicholas Clegg have to go and meet Michel Barnier? You could argue none, but whether Nick Clegg's in Parliament or not, even I wouldn't say he didn't have an important voice in this debate, because he is our former Deputy Prime Minister. And, you know, it was after that meeting that I thought, well, they're hearing from the other side, they're hearing from a somewhat timid government who have rather backtracked a bit since Theresa May's Lancaster House speech. Surely it's about time the views of the 17.4 million were heard. And you know, I get this argument, oh, well, people didn't know what they were voting for. They certainly did. And if you couldn't have missed it if you voted leave, that it was about leaving the European Union, leaving the single market, and taking back control of our borders, our fisheries, and not being governed by foreign courts. All of those things were absolutely clear in the referendum. At least they were, in my view. Mike is calling from Croydon. He's a new caller to the show as well. Good morning.
Good morning to you, sir, and Nigel. Good efforts on your behalf, and many thanks for that. This is a bit of a convoluted question. It comes from listening to Lord Adonis talking to Ian Dale the other day regarding the referendum. So bear with me.
This was the one, Mike, where he said he wanted to sabotage Brexit. Yeah.
But that was the very one. But the comment that made my sort of hackles rise somewhat was he said, the Brexiteers have to come and explain, if there was a referendum, how things are going to change. Because he said, because obviously if we stay within the EU, then we just maintain the status quo. And my rhetorical question, which I would like you to ask Barnier, is, does he think that we will maintain the status quo if we do stay in the EU? Because I can see massive changes coming, and I would like those explained. And I do think it's incumbent, if we do have a referendum, that the stayers do actually spell out the changes. And some of the changes, Macron is going to be an enormous force for change within the EU.
You've made a very strong point. All through the referendum it was, voting to remain is safe, because we know exactly what the EU is and it will stay this way forever, and voting to leave is a risk. You're quite right, Mike. The European Union is changing very, very rapidly, and it's not just Macron who wants to really accelerate centralisation within the European Union. Merkel does as well, although she's in coalition talks today, and whether she can get back as Chancellor or Germany has to have fresh elections remains to be seen. But you know something? When Juncker came to give the State of Union speech this year, Mike, and he said in future there'll be no opt-outs, there'll be no exemptions. Every country must join the euro. Every country must join Schengen, and every country must commit to a foreign policy without veto and to being a fully paid up part of the European army. So, Mike, actually, I think that they are trying as quickly as they possibly can. Before, I believe, as they see it, the revolt gathers pace. They're trying to close the door on the United States of Europe before anybody else tries to wriggle out. And I will, Mike, do my very best to get from him, the question of if we were to reverse Brexit, what would it mean? I'll do my best to do that. Thank you. Loads of messages coming in. I require publication of all minutes of meetings, including Clegg, Clark, etc. We have a right to know. If not, why? Can you record all your EU meetings, says Mark from Milton Keynes. Mark, I am taking somebody... I was going to say a scribe, but he's actually a lawyer. I'll be taking somebody in with me tomorrow so that we will make sure we minute the questions I ask and the answers we get, and that is only right and proper, I think, in these circumstances. Edward says, I accept that in the referendum a small majority voted to leave. However, on such a major issue, I accept that the so-called will of the people could change. If you are so confident that Brexit is popular, Nigel, why are you scared of another referendum? Edward, because we have chosen that fork in the road, and you know, here we are 18 months on. Just look at the numbers now. I mean, Leave now has a very, very much bigger lead than it did last time round. And to put the country through another referendum, when I think, to be honest, we're pretty sure what the result would be not only a shocking waste of time, effort and money, but very destabilising. Actually, what we need is to start being a bit clearer in terms of the vision of where we're trying to go. And I certainly think business would like to see a bit of this. Dave is calling from Hammersmith. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Nigel. I'd like you to ask him why he's continually making negative comments that seek to undermine the friendship that we have with the EU, because we have to trade afterwards. And he seems to me that, you know, the TBJ group of Tusk, Barnier and Juncker are just making comments to alienate people. I didn't vote for Brexit because I didn't believe the government was capable of actually doing it properly. I'd have rather an organisation that actually wanted it did it. Now, the thing is that he's doing these comments. I'll give you an example of one. There'll be no bespoke agreement with the UK. Well, of course there'll be a bespoke agreement. What else were we going to have? Just Canada's deal? Just Japan's deal? Of course, the deal has to be bespoke. There's no two deals are going to be the same. I doubt there's any two deals with Europe that are the same. And the thing is that when he does this, he turns people against the EU, and we have to trade with them afterwards. We want to trade. This is all about us wanting to trade and not wanting to be controlled. I mean, if we go and trade with India, we're not going to just go and say, well, yes, you've got free access to our health service because we're just going to trade. That's the foundation of democracy.
And actually, Dave, it's in the interest of the European people too, isn't it?
Exactly. This is the point. I really don't think that he's representing the country. So
nor do I.
I really don't.
Nor do I. Dave, nor do I. No, you're absolutely right. I thank you for the call. And in fact, the second question I'd picked out from the thousands of tweets that have come in already to hashtag Ask Barnier, which is open for another half an hour, was one from Sergio to ask him what he thinks will happen to the EU economy if he fails to secure a trade deal with us. What would the impact be on EU citizens if the EU were to stop trade with the UK? Well, trade won't stop, but trade might become a little bit more difficult. And you're quite right, Sergio. It's his people that would suffer far more than us. And yet, to date, he doesn't appear to give a damn about the peoples of Europe. I think he cares about those big glass and steel structures, the salaries, the pension, the way of life. Hey, I've been there for 18 years. I'm repulsed by it. I don't like it, but I can see why, for tens of thousands of people, it's been the best thing since sliced bread. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 10:30. I'm off to meet Mr. Barnier. I think the views of 17.4 million people ought to be represented, and I do think immigration should not completely be brushed under the carpet, but talked about. And I'm not sure. I'm convinced that when Sir Nicholas Clegg went there, it wasn't talked about, and I even wonder whether the British government have talked about it. They seem to be wrapped up just in trade, and whilst that's important, this referendum was about more than just economics and trade. It was about sovereignty, democracy, controlling our borders, fishing waters, etc. But before I go there, and we come back to this debate, we can't ignore what's going on in America. Journalist Michael Wolff, who had access to the West Wing and the White House, and who spent some time talking to President Trump, although I have to be honest, not very much time. He says himself it was a maximum of 3 hours, but nonetheless, he's written this book about Trump, about Trump's personal habits, about Trump's eccentricities, and he says that all around, people are questioning Trump's credibility. They're questioning his mental stability. He even says there have been debates about whether Article 25 of the US Constitution should be invoked, which could see him removed as president because he's unfit to govern. Now, I have to say, I take all of this pretty much with a pinch of salt. I've known a lot of billionaires in my business life and political life, and every single one of them is pretty idiosyncratic. It's kind of how they make it in the first place. And I began to doubt some of the legitimacy of this book when some of the subsequent extracts showed that apparently he asked the president about Brexit and the president didn't know what Brexit is. I'm sorry, but, all the campaign team around Trump, were all focused really heavily on Brexit. And after November the 8th and the victory, they all believed that without Brexit, Trump simply couldn't have won. So I do question that. I'm not saying all the book's wrong. I'm sure some of the stuff, as I say, about his eccentricities are true. But this question of mental stability, and it's a pretty wounding thing to be said publicly about anybody. But the president himself responded on Twitter, obviously, as only he can, by saying, actually, throughout my life, my two greatest assets have been mental stability and being, really smart. Crooked Hillary Clinton also played these cards very hard and, as everyone knows, went down in flames. I went from very, in big capital letters, very successful businessman to top TV star to President of the United States on my first try. I think that would qualify me as not smart, but genius. And a very stable genius at that. Well, before I give my thoughts on what he was saying there, Theresa May, our Prime Minister, was asked about Trump and about this furore on the Andrew Marr Show this morning.
You've seen a lot of Donald Trump one way or another. Child or stable genius?
I do. Obviously, I've worked with President Trump on a number of issues, as we continue to work with the United States on a number of issues. President Trump,
What do you make of him?
What I make of him is somebody who is taking decisions on what he believes is in the best interests of the United States. The United Kingdom government and I will take decisions here on what we believe is in the best interests of the UK.
In the States, there are quite serious questions being raised by some people about his mental state. Do you think they're serious?
No. As I say, when I deal with President Trump, what I see is somebody who is committed to ensuring that he is taking decisions in the best interests of the United States.
And he's coming to this country?
He will be coming to this country.
Well, there was the Prime Minister actually being quite supportive of the President. My take on it is this. What Trump does when there's a big crisis, a big row, a big argument, what he's the master of is deflecting attention. So he uses this phrase, stable genius, and it has sent the liberal media into an absolute meltdown frenzy. They can't believe it. They're angrier about him saying he's a stable genius about himself than they are about what's been put in Michael Wolff's book. So it is this stable genius that is now leading all the headlines, becoming the centre of all the debate. And dummies, that's exactly what the president got you to do, because what Trump is clever at, he's good at lobbing a grenade over there and it goes bang and everyone focuses on that and not what they were doing to begin with. And yeah, look, I get it. Donald Trump isn't an Ivy League intellectual. I understand all of that. What he has guts and instinct, and he's a street fighter, and he may play the game in a pretty unconventional way. As I said earlier, every billionaire I've met has been pretty idiosyncratic stroke eccentric in terms of how they live their lives and what they do. Is this book going to damage him? I don't think it will. I think the base will just see it as yet another outright assault on him. The one certainty, absolute certainty from all of this is that Michael Wolff will become a very, very rich man. Because actually, when the president himself attacked the author and attacked the book, all that he did was give it bigger publicity and huge queues, despite the appalling winter weather of people queuing up to buy. fire and fury. There we are. Back to Mr. Barnier, my meeting with him tomorrow, and me asking you, what should I be asking him? And Kevin, a new caller from Doncaster, is on the line. Good morning.
Morning, Nigel. Yes, a little thing about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Just Google the White House website and check out what he's doing on there. While people think he's arguing about this book, he's not.
No.
He's got his top people arresting a lot of influential people throughout the world. So people need to go onto the website and see what he's actually doing on the White House website.
Arresting people, Kevin?
Yeah, there's a few influential people being arrested over the last few days.
OK, well, I haven't seen that, but as I said, Kevin, he's very, very good at deflecting attention somewhere whilst he gets on with the job of being president. Absolutely. So, what do I ask Barnier, Kevin?
Yeah, I would like you to ask him, why we haven't seen any EU accounts for over 20 years.
Well, the answer to that is, Kevin, that we have seen EU accounts over the last 20 years, but every year what we've had in the final auditor's report is their deep reservations about elements of the accounts and missing money and the suspicion that several billion a year goes missing in fraud. And I think perhaps the worst area of this consistently has been the EU's foreign aid budget. So to say the accounts have not been shown for 20 years would be wrong, but to say they've not been fully endorsed and signed off as a true and accurate record would equally be true as well.
Yeah, well, surely someone's culpable for the money going missing then.
Well, no, that's a perfectly fair question, Kevin, and it's interesting because there is a really big cultural difference here that Northern European countries view money, public money, as being absolutely sacrosanct. And the further south you go, the more relaxed the attitude seems to become. Doesn't mean we're better than them or worse than them, but they're different attitudes around Europe to this. They really are.
Nigel, I've been to Portugal recently and France, Denmark, Holland, and those people are not happy with the European Union.
No.
But my Dutch friend said, if the Dutch voted to leave, then they would be absolutely screwed. But that they're not a contributing country into the EU. We are.
Well, Kevin, this debate is going on elsewhere. I thank you for your call. And indeed, one of the questions I get here from Tony is, hi, Nigel, ask Barnier how long the EU can last when you look at Central and Eastern Europe rebelling on immigration. Well, Tony, it's not just immigration, it's also in Poland, judicial appointments. And I thought it was very interesting that Viktor Orban, the very popular Prime Minister of Hungary, gave a New Year's message about Judeo-Christian culture in Hungary, what it meant to him as Prime Minister, what it meant as he saw it to Hungarian society, and how he wasn't going to allow EU immigration to damage that. And that, for a Christmas Day message, really was a red rag being held up to Angela Merkel, Mr Juncker, Michel Barnier, and all the rest of them. If I did ask him how long the EU will last, he'll probably tell me that it's looking better and stronger than it's ever been. But the reality, Tony, as you say, and our previous caller said even in Portugal, is that actually, and this is a point being missed, I think, here a little bit by some of the commentators, that actually the populist revolt, if you want to call it that, I don't call it that because I think the word populist is used as a very pejorative term, but whichever way you cut it, with the exception of Macron winning in France, right across Europe, north, south, east and west, you are seeing opposition, right-wing opposition, left-wing opposition, some in the centre. Opposition to the project is growing, and that is my guess as to why Barnier is trying to be so harsh with the United Kingdom. They want to make it look like it's a prison from which the price of escaping is simply too high. I could be wrong, but that's what I intend to find out tomorrow at 11 o'clock in my meeting. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 10:45. Brexit is not the only problem Mr Barnier and the European Commission have, and the third question that was sent we picked from the thousands sent in by you, was from James Goad from Worcester. And his question was, is Monsieur Barnier keen to see the continuation of mass immigration from assimilable millions from the third world countries into the nations of the EU? If so, why does he support such measures? Well, this business of assimilation is a very, very big issue. And I will ask him that question, because I think really the one issue that has changed European politics and brought it to a wider audience than any other has been the free movement of people, not just within the European Union, but that policy launched by Mr. Juncker and backed up by Mrs. Merkel in 2015, that virtually anybody who set foot on European soil would be allowed to stay. And it is fundamentally changing European politics. So I promise you, James, I will ask him that question tomorrow. Any other ideas? Welcome. Robin is a new caller from Whitehaven in Cumbria. Good morning, Robin.
Good morning, Nigel. I'd like to, I've got a few issues. I voted to leave myself, but after voting to leave, I think I need more information now, because I tell you the biggest issue I've got with it is I voted to leave, and I think the people of the country were misled to some degree. The fishermen thought they would get their waters back.
As they should.
I don't think they're going to.
Well, why not, Robin?
If you're honest with yourself, they're not going to get it. So this is what I've got.
Well, they better do.
I don't think there's any chance of that happening. I think, Nigel, what will happen is Theresa May's government will do a deal to keep the Westminster City elite on a special deal so they can carry on as they are with the financial services, and the average working man and woman will just feel worse off than they are already. I think we should be given another vote. I know you probably won't agree with that, but I'll probably vote to leave again myself, but I want more information, but I also want a government who are going to do the leaving fairly. That's my problem with it. The Tories are not going to do it fairly.
Well, that's a separate question, isn't it? So it's not Brexit you're unhappy with, it's the way the government are handling Brexit you're unhappy with. And you know what, Robin? I share that with you. Fisheries, for me, was one of the key motivations. It's why I allowed Sir Bob Geldof, to rant at me on the Thames for about a 2-hour period on the Wednesday before the referendum. When people living in places like Whitehaven, a port up there in Cumbria, I'm sure a lot of those people in that town went to vote, probably non-voters normally, saying, hey, we've got to leave because we'll get back proper territorial waters and a chance for this harbour to have more boats in it. I completely, Robin, understand that. And all I can say to you is they have to get that. They have to get that. And if Mrs. May's government won't give it to them, then it's a battle that will need to be refought.
Can you ask Mr. Barnier if we decide to stay in, can we stay in on the exact same terms as we are?
No, there's no point asking him that, because as I've explained already during this hour, Robin, the European Union now want to move full steam ahead to a European army, a foreign policy without veto, everyone to be in the Euro and the Schengen area.
Well, I think any other thing you enter, a contract, legal agreement, you have a cooling off period, Nigel. And the people of this great nation were misled on both sides, but we need a more informed debate, and then we can decide if we're definitely going. Because I'll tell you something, you look at the continent, their health system isn't as bad as ours. You're on about the free movement of people coming to this country. I don't have a problem with anyone coming to this country. What I have a problem with is the government's attack on trade unions that let employers take out employ these people because they know they can treat them worse, pay them less.
Well, I mean, Robin, look, open door immigration has been a very, very good thing for big companies and for the rich, and we know that. Robin, I sense your problem isn't Brexit. Your problem is the Tory government, and I understand that, and I respect that. But I repeat the point on fisheries: when we leave the European Union, we must get back our waters, and we must be like Norway, the Faroe Islands and Iceland, and have this amazing, in fact, in many ways, the greatest renewable asset that we possess, the fish within our waters, which, if managed properly, will be there forever. And we'll get tens of thousands of jobs back into the fishing community, benefiting, Robin, places like Whitehaven, where, of course, you indeed come from. Good morning, Nigel. I want to ask Mr. Barnier why you are opposed to the UK leaving the EU. Is it because you're running scared about what it may do to the rest of the Union, BB? Well, believe me, that conversation is bound to happen tomorrow morning. I'm sure that Monsieur Barnier will be as unfailingly polite as he always is. But it's going to be very interesting to get his perspective on all of this. Ask Barnier to explain the chain of command and the rules of engagement of the EU's proposed military strike force, says Richard. Richard, there isn't quite going to be time, I'm afraid, tomorrow morning for all of that. Vital and important though that question is, and that's certainly a question that does need to be raised in the European Parliament. I certainly agree with that. Tim is calling from Chesterfield in Derbyshire. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Nigel. Happy New Year to you.
And to you, and to you. So what should I be doing? How should I play it, Tim? What should my game plan be?
Well, my question is, Brexit voters really have never had any doubt in their minds as to where they wanted to go, and that was out of Europe. Mm-hmm. If you asked Brexit voters before, during and after the referendum, they would be very, very clear on where they wanted to go, and that is out of Europe, to take back control and to have control over managed EU migration. And Brexit voters were very, very, very clear on the question on the ballot sheet. Mm-hmm. So how come, after we've had this referendum, you're now asking the question, we want to put some questions to Mr. Barnier? Because I'll tell you this much. Brexit voters were so sure of themselves, they didn't go to their MEPs or they didn't go on the internet to look at how the EU structures are how they're consistent and how they're put together, because they were so sure of themselves that they wanted out. All of a sudden, now you want details. There was nothing stopping Brexiteers asking their MEPs for details about how the EU
and Tim, can I assure you that many of them did? As you know, I've been there since 1999, and I mean, I've had thousands of letters and emails from people asking questions about how EU law is made. So look, you could argue both Remain voters and Brexit voters perhaps didn't delve as deep as you might like them to have done. But hang on, people do have busy lives as well, don't they?
Oh, please, please, please! If you're making a major decision that's going to affect your life, you're going to find out. You're going to make efforts to find out about it. But my contention is, I don't think Brexiteers did. They were so sure. And second, I'm very sad to say this, but secondly, when you mentioned that you represent the biggest group in the EU, can I just say, UKIP is not on the intensive care. It's died. UKIP has died.
Tim, what I said was that I represent the party that won the last set of European elections in 2014, and that mandate ends in May of 2019. I was asked a question about democratic legitimacy of my attending this meeting tomorrow. I couldn't really have more, could I?
You know what? When you talked the other week about it's time for Remainers to put up and shut up and just get behind the get behind the government. This now sounds like UKIP and etc. and Brexiteers are now saying, "Oh my gosh, this is the real world now," and this swelling in our chest of wanting our country back. We're going to have to be a bit more specific. Tim.
Of course, we want all the same things we wanted, and Brexit voters, in the main, hold those views even more strongly than they did back on June 23rd. But my concern, Tim and everybody else, is that 17.4 million have not had their voices heard. I will endeavour to start a process of doing that tomorrow, and once I've been there, there'll be others from the Leave side that go there as well, and that's a very good thing. So in conclusion, I'm going to ask Paul William-Smith's question about does Barnier understand why we voted for Brexit. I'm going to ask Sergio's question about what happens to the EU economy if there's not a trade deal, because they need us economically. There are more jobs dependent upon us in Europe than there are the other way around. And I'm going to ask James's question about how Monsieur Barnier sees mass immigration into the European Union from coming across the Mediterranean and elsewhere. They're the three that I've picked. Thank you to the thousands of you who've engaged in this by sending in your questions. Now, coming up in the next hour, tomorrow we're told that Theresa May will move to sack at least 6 members of her cabinet in a reshuffle. It's designed to refresh her top team. An aide said she wanted to make sure the government reflects the modern and diverse country that we live in. But what do you want to see from the reshuffle? If you believe it's important that it does, in percentage terms, reflect society, call me on 0345 6060973. Maybe you think, doesn't really matter, just get the best person for the job, then text to 84850. Or maybe you think a balance needs to be struck, and that tokenism would be a dangerous thing, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and watch me on Facebook. I'm live from London next.